IVM.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories, India's very own travel podcast, where each week we share the journey of travelers in their own words and relive their experiences with you, our listeners.
Hi guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories. On the podcast today, we speak with Anuj Haribhakti, a long-time listener, traveler, and a well-wisher of the podcast. Anuj talks about the Gir National Park, the only place in the world where one can spot Asiatic lions in their natural habitat. India is also the only country in the world where lions and tigers can be found in the wild. Let's hop onto the episode and find out more about Anuj's experience. So, with that introduction, we'd love to welcome Anuj Haribhakti, a very dear listener and traveler to the Musafir Stories. Anuj, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really glad that we finally managed to coordinate and get you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Saf. Yeah, it's been a while, and I love Musafir Story. It's like it's my every fortnightly routine to listen to Musafir Stories. So I'm glad that now we are finally talking, and I have a story to share. Yeah.
Yeah, really happy to have you, Anuj. And yeah, we go back a long way. Anuj has been one of our cheerleaders. Like I was telling him, he is always writing with feedback, sharing the podcast with others. So, really grateful and thankful to have made such a great bonding and relationship over time as a listener, as a friend as well. So, glad that you're now on the podcast sharing your own story. So, for anybody who's listening out there, if you have a great story, feel free to write to us. We are always glad to have listeners as well come share their stories on the Musafir Stories. But Anush, the intro I gave earlier on was pretty short and concise. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and where you're speaking to us from today?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Anuj and I am originally from Ahmedabad, Gujarat, and I moved to Australia a while ago, and I have now settled in Australia, and I live in Melbourne. I normally go around places every year, so I have been to 20 plus countries in last 5 years, and it's India that always pulls me back, and I always go back and visit good places in India, and I have a story that I'm gonna share here at Musafir Stories.
Yeah, wonderful. Really looking forward to that. And yeah, like we usually do on the podcast, we try to focus the conversation on a place, on an experience. So, with that in mind, where are you taking us to today?
So I'm taking the listeners to a place in Gujarat, my own state, the place called Sasangir Forest, also called Gir National Park. And the Gir National Park is the only place in the world where you can get Asiatic lions. So it's a very interesting place to go, and there is a lot of good stuff out there. And I would suggest everybody to make a plan and visit Gir.
Yeah, wonderful. Really looking forward to this. And one of those iconic places, like you said, given that this is the only place in the world where you find the Asiatic lions, pretty dwindling and endangered species up until even a few decades ago. But yeah, we've
Yeah.
managed to turn that around, and we're looking forward to learning more from you about how your experience was. But for the uninitiated, somebody who's listening to it for the first time, just a quick high level overview of where this is. Gujarat is in the western part of the country for people coming from outside. But just in terms of how you got there, when it's a good time to visit, etc., can you shed some context on this trip?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Gir National Park is located in the southwestern part of state of Gujarat, which is western India, right? The way you can reach Gir is by either by air, by train. By air, the closest airport is Rajkot Airport, and from Rajkot to Sasangir, it is 3.5 hours drive. closest train station for the broad gauge line is Junagadh, and from Junagadh you can take another meter gauge train to Sasangir, and Sasangir has a train station as well. The best way to get to Gir is to go to Rajkot or Junagadh and hire a car and drive to Gir.
Okay, wonderful. So it is very accessible that way, even though you may have to, for the last mile, you may have to travel by road, but just make sure to plan and make preparations accordingly. Now, what's a good time of the year to visit this, given that parts of India can also get pretty hot, and I'm sure even the national park itself might not be open all around the year, right? So, when's a good time to visit?
Yeah, so the national park is closed from mid-June to mid-October due to the seasonal rains, and from October onwards, the national park is open. Now, due to the forest, the Gir forest is deciduous forest, right? So after the rain or seasonal rain, the forest is very very green. So if you want to experience amazing forest, you go from November all the way to almost January, and that's the best time to go if you want a green forest and amazing flora and fauna. For wildlife spotting, the best time is from mid-February all the way to probably end of May. And hotter it is, it's better wildlife for you because the animals come out for water or hunting and mating and everything. So best time for animal spotting is after Feb, before May.
Okay, I think those are some great tips, and for people looking at these different experiences, Anuj gave some wonderful tips as to when you can plan your trip as well. And in terms of your options to stay around the area, what kind of options are there, and what did you personally choose?
So, Sasangiri is quite famous, right? So you can have budget option and luxury option. So you can have all the way from very cheap budget motels all the way to a very, very, very expensive luxury hotel as well. There are jungle lodges, which is very budget option, but they are very, very good. And then there are Aramnes, or there are Taj and Sarovar and all that kind of a resort style places as well. We sort of chose the middle kind of hotel. We stayed at a fun Gir resort, which was not very budget but not very expensive as well. And the best thing about choosing fun was it is very very close to the entrance of the forest, and all the safari. We were only 7 minutes away from
Oh.
the safari. Yeah, so in the morning you can get up as late as possible and straight go to the safari. But if you decide to stay in like fancy Aramnes or something like that, these hotels are very very far away. So if you take a morning safari, you have to drive 30-40 minutes to the entrance of the forest. So always select the closest possible place to the entrance, because the morning safaris are very early morning and you wanna be as late as possible.
Yeah, you want to sleep well, especially
Yeah.
I don't know, like Aramnes, I think was over a lakh a night or something like that. Crazy, right? So it
Yeah.
can be pretty expensive if you want the real luxury experience. You have those, but yeah, decide if you want to sleep longer or just stay in a luxury space and not even get to sleep well. But yeah, jokes aside. Those are definitely a broad range of options for people looking for budget stays as well. There's definitely something. Also, in terms of just I know it's not that you decide one day you want to go to Gear and you just wake up and you show up and you can make it, right? I'm sure there's requirements for booking or permits and stuff like that. So, how did you plan that, and how much in advance are these things usually needed?
So, yeah, there is definitely a booking required. So the Safari booking is done through the government website. There is only one place where you can do Safari booking, and or there are travel agents who can do it, but you have to be very careful selecting a travel agent because obviously there are scams around. So
Right.
I would recommend to just go to the government website and book your own safari. For us, we sort of planned 2.5 months in advance to get the best timings. So morning, there are three safaris out there. There is a 6 a.m. one, a 9 a.m. one, and a 3 p.m. one. The most popular one is the 6 a.m. one because that's the best time to view wildlife.
Hmm.
The 9 a.m. one are normally the least popular, but if
Right.
you do want to go 9 a.m. one, you can do one of the days and you can see different style of the forest. And then the 3 p.m. one, which is also a sunset safari. It can get really hot, and the wildlife viewing chances are not as good as the morning, but you can see some of the non-lion wildlife. So you can see all the different other wildlife after 3 p.m. But you can see amazing sunset at Gir
Yeah.
at a 3 p.m. safari. But yeah, I would
Okay.
highly recommend to book 2 to 3 months in advance and get your slots going. Other these slots are very popular. The other thing that I wanted to mention is there is only 50 cars allowed at one point of time for the safari. So
Hmm.
the slots are very little, and there are lots and lots of visitor during peak time. And May is generally the best time to view wildlife, but it is also vacation time in India, and everybody goes
Sure.
there. So you need to book way in advance for if you are planning to go during school vacations.
Okay, yeah, definitely does make sense, and thank you for
Hmm.
setting all of this context so well. Before we start and jump into the actual experience, your safari experience in the Gir National Park, I also wanted to touch upon just some background on these Asiatic lions, right? Do you want to shed some light on that? I know just how these are different from the, let's say, African lions, and just the background to it.
Yeah, so the Asiatic lions are slightly different from the African lions, right? So the main difference between Asiatic lion and the African lions is the size. So Asiatic lion is about 10 to 15% smaller, right? And for the male lion, African lions have a bigger mane, and the Asiatic lions have a smaller mane. The reason for that is the Africa in Africa, the where the lions are, the jungle, it doesn't have a lot of trees, and it's not a very dusty jungle. So the hair stays on the face of the lion, whereas Gir is a very dense forest. As per our guide, the lion loses hair really quickly because of the denseness of the forest.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, but like you said, I think the most visible difference is the smaller size and lesser hair, also, right? The male
Yeah.
is much smaller too, so you could definitely notice that. And from what I looked up as well, apparently this is like about 20 to 50,000 years ago that they started the migration away from Africa towards Asia, and were predominantly found in regions like Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, India, right? This stretch, this belt is where they
Yes.
were found. And yeah, now, like I said, over time, they've just been subjected to, they went from being in the thousands to uh, as recently as the 1900s, we almost were down to a dozen, perhaps, right? As few as a 20 or so, even in India. And like even today, India is the only place in the world where you can find these lions. So
Yeah.
they are an endangered species, and I believe what critically endangered species, right? Up until recently. So it has been quite a remarkable story of success in this case, right? Do you want to share some of that experience and background too, about how these big cats have basically gone from almost being extinct to now it's almost like a bustling population in Gir, right?
Yeah, so as you said, yeah, they were right down to like dozens in early 1900s when the hunting was happening. So after the independence, the government launched a project called Project Gir Lion. In I think it's in mid 60s they've sort of started doing the conservation, and in mid 60s the population of the lions were like in hundreds, so probably around 150. And between 60s and 90s, nothing much has happened. So the population growth was very minor. So they only in 30 years time they only went from 150 to 300 ish. But then around in mid early to mid 2000s, the Indian government launched a another project called Project Lion. They wanted to figure out how do we increase the population of lions, and how do we actually reduce the conflict between the humans and the lions around Gir, right? So what they've done is they created uh, first of all, they created food and water for the lions. So they created the wind and the solar water ponds. So it pumps the water from the ground and creates those ponds for the wildlife to drink. And also, what they did was they added a lot of food for the lions, right? So they increase the population of the deers and the sambas in the great rainforest, so the lions can easily hunt. So as simple as they've given them food and water so that the population started increasing, right? Yeah, so the second problem that Indian government faced was the conflict between humans and the lions. So the villagers would get interrupted by lions, and the villagers would kill lions, or if they eat their domestic stock, so then the villagers would kill lions. So the way Indian government solved that problem was to hire the guards, female guards for the forest, and lot of the villagers listen to the female guards really really well, right? Because the females are the female lions, so the lioness are the one who actually hunt for the food, and the human females actually make food, right? So when the villagers were supposed to listen to the females, they were actually understanding the problem, and the females were in really great place to actually explain all the problems of killing the lions and everything. So it was a massive success. Actually, from that mid 2000s to now, the lions population went from roughly 300s into 650s now. So it's doubled up. And it has created a secondary problem where now the lions have are overpopulating the area and they don't have a lot of space to live in. So
Yeah.
it is a good problem to have, but the whole of creating water and the food and reducing the conflict between humans and lions have created an amazing thriving forest for lions to live in. And I'm really proud of our Indian government and what they have done.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the state government. I mean, credit where it's due, but usually governments don't get their act together when it comes to wildlife, right? So I'm really glad that, especially when this was very critical, also, right? Like we said,
Yeah.
this is almost they were down to a dozen, and now we're in a position where there's more than the place can managed to have. So it's one of the good success stories, and I'm hopeful that this can continue, as well as other governments can take, other state governments and the central government also can take leave of what has worked out well, and they've really come up with some novel ways, things like recruiting female forest rangers and guards, and helping spread that message of why it is important to coexist, because again, given that so much of the animals natural habitat has been taken up over time by agricultural lands and stuff like that, it is bound to happen, right? Man human,
Yeah.
sorry, the human animal conflict. So it's great that they've chosen ingenious ways to tackle that, and it's worked out well. Again, thank you so much for giving all of this good context, because sometimes it is important to understand the background of such stories. I know from an experience perspective, it is great to go and see, and that's the key to it. But the bigger picture is also equally important in a lot of situations. So, thanks for shedding some light on that. So, let's jump into your safari experience finally, right? Let's jump into this and give us a little bit of a background. Like, once you got there, once you had your stuff sorted out, both from permits or bookings to your stay, and everything was sorted out. Like, you're in the national park and you're looking forward to your first safari experience. How was it? And just give us a sense of, like, even in terms of probability of sighting wildlife on these safaris. How likely is it? What types of things you're seeing, etc.
Yeah, so for the safari, like there are, as I mentioned earlier, there are three slots, right? So the best chance to get is a morning slot is your best option to view the wildlife. And um, normally the morning slot start at 6 a.m. and we have to just run, get up and run to the it's always like we are always getting up late. So when you get to safari, the start of the the gate is called Sihi Sadan. So
Mm,
you have to get from wherever you are into the sea southern, and then you are when you buy your tickets, either you can buy the whole jeep for yourself, or you can just buy one spot or number of spots in the jeep. So there are
right.
six spots available in the jeep. Plus you have one guide and one driver, right? So the driver and the guide are allocated randomly. So even if you buy four or five safari passes, it is likely that you won't get the same driver and the guide every day,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm,
There are 13 routes available in Gir National Park, and also the routes are randomly chosen. So the management has tried to cut out all those quirks on which route are the best viewing option, which route are not the best viewing option, and also this way the wildlife is disturbance is minimal, right? So the
mm,
jeeps are spread across the forest, and there are 13 routes. So at given one route, it's only three or four cars. So that's such a nice way of putting wildlife at peace as well. So when we get in the morning, it is 3 hours safari, right? So you get there
mm,
at 6 a.m. It's not a sunrise, so you start your safari during the dark, and then you gradually wake up the jungle. So you are in a jeep, the sun is rising. It is one of the most amazing thing you can do, because the weather is like, the atmosphere is so clean, it's so quiet. There's nothing much going on other than probably animal noises and your car noise. And you are driving into the forest. There is lots and lots of wildlife in the morning. So you see a lot of deers, you see a lot of zambas, nilgais, ev- all those, herbivorous animals you can see in the first place. But then your main event is your lions, right? So um, the best part about 3 hour safari is you only remember. So your lion sighting could be at the start, could be at the middle, could be at the end, right? A lot of the times the guides are so clever that they know where the lions are, and
mm,
they can show us the pug marks and the foot marks of the lions and where they are going. And it is very very high chances that you're going to view lions in the morning, right? But the viewing is only probably about 5 or 10 minutes, right? So if you are lucky enough, and we were very lucky that we saw lions every day in our safari.
mm-hmm,
So we did
mm-hmm.
about four safaris, and every day we had lion sightings. So we were very very lucky, right?
Wow. Yeah.
We saw roughly 20 plus lions in our
Oh my God. Okay.
yeah, in total, right? So first day it was 3 hours of safari, and you're just driving around in one of the routes. And bear in mind, every route is roughly 20 plus kilometers long, right?
Mm,
So and it is not a road, it's just a jungle. Like
sure.
so your the drive is not very smooth, right?
Yeah.
So it is very slow. So you looking at 3 hours of safari, and you say 10 minutes of pretty much your sighting, and you forget rest of 2 hours and 50 minutes when you actually see the lions. And then you come out of the safari and you are like, oh my god, that's 3 hours done, and we only remember 10 minutes of it. And the lion sightings, whenever that happens, so on the first day we saw two male lions sitting side by side.
Mm,
And because on our route that was the only sighting that they had, so there was four or five cars coming and going around the places. So our car went in, and we took some pictures. And the male lions were like, I think they were the old male lions, and they were really, really big, like huge. And if we think these are the small lions, imagine the African lions are so large.
Yeah.
uh, and they are wild lions, right? So you are just waiting and waiting and waiting, and the driver and the guide would just figure out where the lions are, and they try to go in different way. But yeah, at the end, when it happens, everything is forgotten, right? So when you see the lions, the mesmerizing sights of the lions. So day one we saw two lions, and then the second day we went and saw a female and a male, young female and a male lions, right? Those lions were either finished mating or they were about to go into mating, but we didn't know. So we saw them walking across the jungle, and they were probably trying to find a spot to just sit there.
Mm.
And our car and the driver, they were so clever. One of the person in our group spotted the lion, and then the driver was kept on following the lions, and a lioness. And we saw them walking from one place to other place, and we had like, we were just sitting and watching them, and they were like sitting and watching us. So and it was like 10 minutes or so. We just had so many photos, and everyone in our jeep were like so excited, but we can't make any noise because that disturbs the life. So it was like excitement, but we can't make any movement or noise because it's, one is dangerous, second is like disturbing the wildlife. So male and female lion were sitting, and then they started walking inside the forest. And then the lucky part was the road also went inside the forest. So we were following the lions for, I think we followed the lions for 15 minutes, right? And it was amazing. I mean, I cannot, the words cannot express how good the viewing was. And we were very, very lucky because the other cars in our route did not follow us, and they stopped at some other place in the route, and they couldn't see. So we were the only
Mm.
car in our route that saw those male and female lions. So they were the young, 3 years old lions, and they were like prime. It was such a nice viewing. And I clicked a picture of that particular lion, and I think that is best picture I've ever taken in my life. So
Mm.
we were very silent but very excited. That was mind blowing. And the
Yeah,
third
yeah.
day we did a morning safari. I mean, since we already saw two male lions and a male and a female lion on 2 days, we were like, okay, we were very relaxed. But the best part was the moment we entered the jungle, we saw four cubs and a lioness. And at the start of the jungle, before the routes get separated, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have all of the cars together, and then the routes get separated. That's how the
Right.
jungle is. They were at the start of the jungle, so they were literally at the gates, the four lion
Mm.
cubs. So they're like at least 50 cars behind them, and they were like just walking very cool and calm and collected, in as if then nothing has happened, right? So they were just walking, and all the cars just kept on following them. And then when the routes are separated, then the lions went some other route, right? Whichever, I think we were on the route 13 on that day or something like that.
Mm.
And we were so lucky that on that day our guide was so experienced that he
Mm.
knew that these lions, he knew which lions were there
Mm.
and where what they are doing. He took us to a place in our route, and we were just sitting there for 40 minutes. Like we didn't do anything, and we were just sitting in the middle of nowhere in the jungle for 40 minutes. We can't get out of the car because it's not allowed.
Sure.
And we were just sitting there, and then the four cubs and one lioness that we saw in the morning, they were coming towards us. So we
Okay.
we went around them, and he knew how the route was of the lions, and then we went around them in our route, and then those four cubs came towards us, so right in front of us. And it was so scary because one of the lioness, so we are in the car sitting, right? We're not doing anything. First the lioness came and checked us out. I'm sitting in the car. The lioness was 2 feet away, literally. So
Mm.
they can jump on us easily. That's how
Mm.
close we got to the lioness. And then the cubs came around. And the weirdest part, or the best part, was that I had a zoom lens, and I couldn't
Uh-huh.
even zoom out. because they were so
So
close.
close.
So I never got any pictures of them that are so
Yeah.
close. And I was like, okay, should I click picture? Should I look? Should I click picture? And I'm not allowed to make any movement, that
Right.
brief
Right.
movement. So I couldn't even take out my phone. But luckily, my friend had his phone out and we could take the pictures. But the
Uh-huh.
lions came to us next both sides of our jeep and then went backwards. So uh, it was maybe about, it took us roughly what, 5-10 minutes for them to cross us. But that 10 minutes was the most thrilling 10 minutes probably in my life for a long time. I haven't had that. Yeah, because you see lioness coming towards you, and you are like 2 feet away from a lioness in the wild. It's not in it's not in the zoo, right? It's like,
Right.
yeah. And lioness seems very angry that day, maybe because at the start they were like 50 cars behind them,
Oh yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
we were scared and thrilled at the same time. And the the guide was making a lot of joke that day. He was like,
Mm.
oh, you know what, we can't move, because if you move, your name from the Aadhaar card will be disappearing as fast as possible. So it's like we were so thrilled and we couldn't. I mean, I will never forget that moment where the lion was coming to, like, the lioness was coming towards us and the cubs were
Yeah.
following them. I was thrilled and I was speechless on that day. So
Yeah. There's only so much justice words can do, and even pictures can do, right? These experiences are really, really hard
yeah,
to come by, even, right? Forget about explaining them. And it also, I guess, highlights the importance of having good guides and
yeah,
trackers for you, right? That can also
absolutely.
like significantly enhance the experience you have, and also them giving you important tidbits about the lions or facts about the jungle, about the tours and stuff like that. So it's really important, and I'm glad that not just the spotting part or the viewing part of it, you also had like great guides to kind of take you and have perhaps experiences that some of the others didn't have. So really, really glad to hear that, and I can literally even feel that in your voice now as you explain the excitedness. Some of that actually still shows in as you're explaining that to us. Glad that you had that chance. And how many did you say you had? About 4 safaris planned? Is
Yeah.
that what you did? Okay.
So we did the three of them. The fourth one we did went to this other place called Gir Interpretation Zone, also called
Okay.
Devalia Park. So the importance of that is a 4 kilometer by 4 kilometer fenced area where they do all sorts of breeding and controlling the lion population there, right? That Devalia Park is open every day, all year, right? Even if you can't go to the main Gir forest, you can always go to the Devalia Park, right? And if you are not lucky enough, and if you don't spot any wildlife in the Gir National Forest, you can 100% vouch that you will spot lions in the Devalia Park, because there's so many there, and it's such a small place that they breed, right? And that's where all the guides are female guides, right? So the Devalia
Okay.
Park is the training ground for all the guides and drivers. Yeah, I would recommend to leave the Devalia Park at the very end of your safari, and that's where you can always spot the lions, right? Because it's a very small area. The other significance of the Devalia Park is Gir not only have lions, they have also have leopards, right? But leopard sighting are not as good as lion sighting, right? It's
Sure.
very rare that you see wild leopard in Gir. I mean, you might need to do 10 safaris to see leopards, right? And if you have that time, that's amazing, right? But normally you only have time for 3 or 4 days or 5 days maximum, right? So there is very low chances of spotting leopards. Leopards are also in the Gir. They also kill humans, right? So they lions normally don't kill humans, but leopards do. So what government has done is, when a leopard becomes man-eater, the government don't kill the leopard. They move the leopard to Devalia Park, where they've created like a massive place for leopards, man-eater leopards to stay. Like, so what the guides call it is, it's a jail for leopard to eat man,
Oh.
right? But it's not really a jail because it's an open area. And
Yeah.
within the big fence there is a smaller fence for leopard, right? So the cars don't go in, but the cars go around on top of the
Right.
walls. So the leopards are in a well, big well, like a huge place, and there are hundred, like not hundred, but there are lots and lots of leopards there. So if you, and which is very likely that you don't see leopard in Gir, and you will definitely see leopards in the Devalia Park. So if you want to see real leopards, big leopards, you see Devalia, you go to Devalia Park, right? So that's the significance of Devalia Park.
Okay, and how far is this from, say, the Gir National Park?
Oh, it is actually within the Gir National Park. So it's inside. So you still have to go to the same gate, and then from the gate you go inside the Gir forest, and then there is another gate that takes you to the Devalia Park. So it's the same place that you go. It's just a different route that you have to take.
Okay, okay, wonderful. So, yeah, for somebody who maybe are not as lucky as Anuja and his gang were in terms of sighting and also a variety of sightings, right? First day you saw the male lions, and then the
The-
next day a couple, and then the third day with the cubs. So you
yeah,
pretty much got the whole
yeah,
range of them. But for somebody who's not as lucky, you can always go to the Devalia Park where you can have, you could say, a much more controlled environment. So that way the probability of seeing is also, obviously it's almost guaranteed, like you said, right?
yeah,
So that's also something you can plan for. And one other thing, like you also mentioned, right, the female forest guards and the rangers and everybody those are there, hats off to them as well. We spoke about them earlier. And if somebody is interested, I came across this documentary almost that they made about these forest rangers called as Lion Queens of India. Apparently this was
yes,
done by Discovery Channel, so you could check that out as well. Again, like, you have to appreciate all of these things, right? This place, this program has become a success due to a lot of different things, a lot of different stakeholders actually working towards it. And these female guards, like they call the Lion Queens of Gear, they also play a very, very important part. Again, beyond just making sure that this human animal conflict is limited, they are also pretty much putting their lives at risk day in and day out, right? It's not like a
yes,
comfortable desk job like a lot of us have in the comforts of a building with AC and desk and a chair. It's not that. Day in and day out they pretty much put their lives at risk, and beyond that they're also working towards saving this once upon a time endangered species. So hats off to them and other stakeholders too, like locals, like the tribes or whoever who live around the area, right? Drivers and the trackers and the naturalists, the guides, all of them as well, and the government, of course, they also have an important role in bringing all of this together. So hats off to all of these different stakeholders also. But I think this has also resulted in, like you said, we are almost in a situation now where
yeah,
there is the problem of overpopulation of sorts, right?
yes.
That has also become an issue. Do you want to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so as the Gir National Park is not the largest park in India,
Right.
right? So there's around 670 odd lions right now. That's counted. There could be very a lot of. So what the guides was telling me was there are more than 900 there, right? So that's what the rumor is. The official number could be a smaller number, and that created, like, there is a space problem now. So the central government wants to create a secondary park outside of Gujarat, and because the lions are pride of the Gujarat government is not going to give up on them, right? So I think in next couple of years we'll hear something about conserving more because there is severe problem of space, and
Yeah.
I think only this year the Gujarat government also announced the expansion of the Gir forest. So they might create more space within the Gir forest to have more lions there. So we'll watch this space for next couple of
Yeah.
years and see what happens.
Yeah, because I think you must have seen these viral videos, right, where Pride of Lions is walking about on the streets and stuff like that. This is from areas around Gir, right? There's,
Yes,
like Anuj
yes,
mentioned, there has been so many of them after the success of this Project Lion that they have started to venture out of the national park or the boundaries. There's no real boundaries or fences as such, right? So it's easy for the lions to actually venture out as well, and it's become so much that it could be problematic. So there are stocks, and I believe the Barda. I don't know if this is the national park yet or not, but that's one area that's being considered. And also, I don't know, sheer coincidence or whatever, but recently in, I forget the name, I think it's Kuno National Park in Madhya Pradesh, right, where the cheetahs were introduced
Yes.
from Africa. Like that was one of the places being considered, but obviously there was a little bit of the prestige issue, like you could
Yes.
call it as well. That Gujarat obviously feels that they have done this turnaround, and this is the home for the lands, the lands of the pride of Gujarat. So
Yeah.
there's the ongoing conversations there too, but hopefully it gets addressed, because if there is a situation there, this could be problematic as well, right? One, obviously, there's the man-animal conflict. If they venture out of
Yeah.
the park, this can be a problem, and also. It's almost like putting all your eggs in one basket, right? In
Yeah.
cases of like a epidemic or some sort of a disease or something, you don't want all of them to be impacted, because even when I was looking up about this, apparently can't remember the name of the disease, but not long ago there was an outspread in Africa, where within a period of about 3 weeks there was almost like 1,000 lions that were killed because of this disease, right? So you don't
Yeah.
want to be in a situation like that where all the hard work you've done over literally decades gets wiped out, and even like natural calamities, cyclones, floods, like anything can happen, right? So you want to avoid putting everything, like all your eggs in one basket. So that there's that risk as well. Hopefully this gets sorted out, but it's a good problem to have, right? At
Yeah,
least it's not a problem
absolutely.
that but yeah, it's been great, and like I said, there's a lot of stakeholders involved, and just hats off and kudos to all the people,
Mm.
the central and state governments as well, that have been involved to make this happen. Any other thoughts, any experiences that beyond the safaris that you'd like to call out at this point, Anuj?
So about 50 kilometers away from Gir, there is Somnath Temple, which is one of
Mm-hmm.
the 12 Jyotirlinga of the Shiva.
Sure.
Not only the temple, the place around Somnath is amazing. Like the ocean and the sunset and the place, and it's such a great place to be. So I would highly recommend, even if it's not the temple that you want to visit, just go to the Somnath. We did do a day trip at Somnath, and it is great place to go. The other place on the opposite side of Somnath is Div. We didn't make a trip there, but it's about 1.5 hours drive from Gir as well. So
Okay.
you can go to Div or Somnath or even both if you have time.
Okay, yeah, wonderful. Yeah, there is options available, and Gujarat that way I think is great in terms of the variety it has, right? Not
Mm,
just natural, but things like the Run of Kutch or
yeah,
even historical places within the city, right? The city of Ahmedabad has so much to see. One of the heritage cities, UNESCO heritage cities as well. So there's a lot of options. But even in the immediate vicinity, there's these options that Anuj has touched upon. And if you want even to do, like, let's say a little bit of history, we touched upon Junagadh. Junagadh is not too far away, right? That has also been a princely state.
yeah. It is a princely state. Yeah, there are forts and stuff like very similar to Rajasthan. So it is
Yeah.
also a great place to visit.
Yeah, definitely you have that option. And by the way, I think when it started out, Gir was basically the private hunting grounds of the Nawabs of Junagadh, right? That's how it was back in the day. But since then, a lot has changed, and yeah, no, it's not too far away. If you want to make a quick trip, you could visit these places as well. But again, thank you so much, Anuj. Firstly, again, we've been chatting for such a long time. It's so wonderful to have you on the podcast and have this conversation where you shared your personal experience visiting Gir. But beyond that as well, sharing this experience in such detail, not just the sighting aspects of it, but the context, the turnaround, and the circumstances under which the turnaround happened, and also the challenges that still everybody continues to face and how we're working towards it. Like, you covered all of that in so much length and so much detail. So thank you so much for that. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast, and we look forward to having you back, hopefully, whenever you make your next trip to India or elsewhere, and share those experiences. But once again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Saf. Yeah, it's been great chatting to you, and thank you for inviting me onto the podcast. It's been great fun recording. And yeah, I'm looking forward to another trip to India, another place to visit, and then I hope I have enough content to share here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We'll look forward to that. And for other listeners as well, if you have a great story, do definitely feel free to reach out, and we will have a chat and see how best we can bring you onto the podcast. But thank you so much, Anuj. It's always great to have listeners on the podcast.
Thank you, Seth.
That was yet another great episode on the Musafir Stories. Make sure to show us some love by sharing the podcast with your friends and family. We are on Instagram and Twitter at Musafir Stories. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM podcast app or the website. Follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram.